James had always been someone who believed in love, someone who trusted people easily and saw the good in them before anything else. He worked hard, cared for his family, and thought deeply about the people he let into his life. Over the years, he had been careful about relationships, sometimes too careful, sometimes too trusting. Meeting Lauren had felt like something that just fell into place. They met through friends, and from the first conversations, James had felt a connection he hadn't felt with anyone else. It wasn't just the way she smiled or laughed, though those were the things he noticed first. It was the way she seemed to understand him, to listen in a way that made him feel important, valued, and cared for. For the first few months, everything was simple, almost easy. They went out to dinner, walked in parks, met each other's friends, and James felt the slow, steady joy of companionship. But soon, as with every relationship, small things started to show themselves, little habits, tiny quirks, moments that seemed odd but were easily explained. Lauren was very social, very charming, and very clever at presenting herself the way she wanted the world to see her. James liked that about her at first. He liked that she could light up a room, that she seemed admired wherever she went. But sometimes he noticed people giving her looks that didn't quite match her friendly smile, or whispers that ended when she approached. At first, he brushed it off. He thought maybe he was imagining things. Meanwhile, Emily, who worked in the same office as Lauren, had started noticing things that didn't add up. She was quiet, observant, and always careful not to jump to conclusions. But it was hard not to notice when someone's actions didn't match their words. Lauren was talented at making herself look generous, kind, and compassionate. She spoke often about helping people, about giving back to charity, and about caring for those less fortunate. Yet Emily began hearing stories from others, small, almost unimportant incidents, but they started forming a pattern. Someone mentioned that Lauren had claimed credit for volunteering events she hadn't attended. Another coworker noted that Lauren had boasted about donating to causes, but receipts and records suggested otherwise. Emily didn't want to believe the worst of someone she didn't even know very well. She told herself she might be reading too much into these things. People sometimes exaggerated, she reasoned. Maybe Lauren just wanted to be liked. Maybe she just wanted to look good in front of others. Emily tried to push the thoughts aside. She focused on her work and tried to forget about it. But it lingered. There was a nagging feeling that something wasn't right, a sense that behind Lauren's charm there was something hidden. It wasn't just small exaggerations that caught Emily's attention. It was the way Lauren interacted with James. Emily had seen him around the office with her on a few occasions, just small introductions and casual conversations, but there was something calculated about Lauren's behavior. She smiled a certain way, laughed at jokes she didn't seem to find funny, and always seemed to steer conversations to her benefit. Emily had been hesitant to think this mattered. After all, James was an adult and people could act differently with friends or partners. But over time it became clear that Lauren's behavior with James was not always genuine. One evening, Emily stayed late at work and saw Lauren going through a drawer, taking out envelopes and documents, then carefully putting some back and hiding others. It wasn't obvious at first, but Emily's curiosity and instinct told her to pay attention. She began noting small details. Lauren sometimes exaggerated stories about gifts or trips, mentioned expenses that didn't add up, and sometimes borrowed small amounts from coworkers with promises that were never quite kept. It wasn't dramatic at first, but the pattern grew, and Emily felt the unease settle heavier with each observation. Emily's decision to finally speak up weighed heavily on her. All night she had thought about the right words, the right approach, and the best way to ensure James would understand without feeling attacked or humiliated. She knew that confronting him with suspicions could be dangerous if she got it wrong. She needed evidence, she needed clarity, and she needed calm. The previous weeks of careful observation and notes had given her confidence, but the responsibility still sat on her shoulders like a heavy weight. She kept reminding herself honesty mattered more than comfort. The next morning, Emily arrived at work earlier than usual, clutching her notebook and the small folder of screenshots, receipts, and written observations she had collected. Lauren arrived not long after, cheerful and seemingly oblivious to the undercurrent of tension that Emily carried. As Emily sat at her desk, she observed Lauren with careful attention. Everything about Lauren seemed practiced. The laugh, the gestures, the casual way she interacted with everyone. She smiled at coworkers, exchanged pleasantries, and gave subtle compliments that seemed calculated to make her look kind. Emily noticed the small contradictions again, an inconsistency in her story about lunch with a colleague, a subtle exaggeration about a charitable donation, but she ignored them for now. The focus was James. James arrived shortly afterward, unaware of the storm that was building. He greeted Emily with a warm smile, a little tired from the morning commute but happy to see her. She smiled back, keeping her expression neutral, hiding the nervous energy that churned in her stomach. They exchanged small talk about the office, the weather, and ongoing projects. Emily's mind, however, was elsewhere. She thought about how to begin, how to make him listen without sounding judgmental or paranoid. She considered starting with general observations about behavior or moving straight into the incidents she had documented. Each approach carried risks, and she felt her heart racing as she waited for the right moment. Lauren, meanwhile, seemed to sense nothing. She wandered past Emily's desk, laughing lightly at a joke made by a colleague, her movements smooth and practiced. Emily's stomach tightened. She knew that the longer she waited, the more James could continue to be influenced by Lauren's charm. She finally decided to act during their lunch break when she could speak with James privately without distractions. When lunchtime came, Emily asked James if he could step out for a quick walk. He agreed, curious but unsuspecting, and they moved toward a quiet corner of the building's courtyard. The air was crisp and calm, and the sunlight fell gently across the path they walked. Emily tried to steady her breathing, rehearsing her opening lines in her head. She began carefully, starting with general observations, framing them in the context of concern rather than accusation. "James," she started softly, "there's something I've noticed for a while, and I feel like I need to share it with you. I want you to hear this because I care about you, not because I want to create trouble." James nodded, his curiosity growing. Sensing the seriousness in her tone, Emily took a deep breath and continued, "I've noticed a few things about Lauren's stories and actions that don't quite match up. I've tried to ignore it, thinking maybe I was overreacting, but I've seen enough to feel like you should know." James frowned slightly, surprised by her directness. He trusted her, knew she was honest, but he hadn't expected this. She carefully laid out each observation one at a time, keeping her voice calm and neutral. She showed him the screenshots, the receipts, the small notes she had made over the weeks. She explained situations where Lauren had exaggerated charitable contributions, inconsistencies in her personal stories, and instances where she had asked for favors or money in ways that didn't seem genuine. With each piece of evidence, James's expression shifted from confusion to disbelief. At first, he tried to rationalize it. "Maybe she just forgot, or maybe she made a mistake," he said quietly. But as Emily continued showing him patterns rather than isolated incidents, James's defenses began to crumble. The reality was hard to accept. He had loved Lauren deeply, trusted her completely, and the thought that someone he cared for could manipulate him in such subtle ways was overwhelming. Emily remained patient, knowing that he needed time to process. She didn't push judgment or anger, instead letting the evidence speak for itself. She understood that love could cloud judgment, that even clear facts might be hard to accept when emotions were involved. She simply guided him gently through each incident, explaining what she had observed and why it concerned her. James paused frequently, absorbing each piece of information. He asked questions, seeking clarification, trying to reconcile the Lauren he thought he knew with the behavior Emily described. It was a painful process, a slow peeling away of layers of illusion. He remembered the moments he had ignored small doubts, telling himself that his feelings were enough to trust her. Now, confronted with tangible evidence, he realized those doubts had been valid all along. By the time they finished their walk, James was quiet, staring down at the ground. Emily could see the conflict in his eyes, the hurt, the disbelief, the betrayal. But beneath it was also a flicker of gratitude. He was grateful that she had cared enough to come forward, that she had taken the risk to protect him, even knowing it could affect her relationship with him. Over the next few days, James began quietly observing Lauren himself, looking for the patterns Emily had pointed out. At first, he tried to see them as coincidences, but the truth became undeniable. Small manipulations, calculated charm, and inconsistencies that had once seemed insignificant now formed a clear picture. He realized that Lauren's affection had often been self-serving, that her charm was a tool to achieve her own goals, Emily and James developed a careful plan for how he would confront Lauren. He didn't want a public scene, didn't want to create unnecessary drama, but he also knew that he needed closure and honesty. Emily supported him, offering guidance but never pressuring him. She listened, helped him organize his thoughts, and encouraged him to trust his instincts. Through their conversations, James began to regain a sense of clarity he hadn't felt in months. Meanwhile, Emily continued to witness Lauren's behavior in the office, taking note of new incidents but keeping them separate from the confrontation. She knew that any direct accusation without James's awareness could backfire. Her careful patience and documentation ensured that when the time came, James would be armed with evidence and insight rather than suspicion alone. The tension in the office grew subtly. Lauren sensed a shift in James, though she didn't understand why. He no longer ignored inconsistencies, no longer dismissed small manipulations. His demeanor changed, his confidence returning as he recognized patterns he had previously overlooked. Emily watched from a distance, relieved that James was beginning to see the truth without being blindsided by anger or shame. One afternoon, as James and Emily reviewed some documents together, Lauren approached, smiling and cheerful, unaware of the storm beneath the calm surface. She engaged them in conversation, attempting charm and subtle manipulation, but James remained composed. He had begun to recognize the signs, and Emily could see the moment Lauren realized that her influence was waning. The following days were filled with reflection for James. He thought back on their relationship, the moments he had felt happiest and the small doubts he had pushed aside. He realized that while love had guided him, vigilance and discernment were equally important. Emily's intervention had given him clarity and perspective that he might not have gained on his own. Emily felt a mixture of relief and anxiety. She had acted with integrity, but she also knew that confronting someone about their partner could have unforeseen consequences. She prayed that James would navigate the situation with care and that Lauren's response would not escalate beyond reason. Her role was supportive, not directive, and she remained a steady presence as James prepared for the confrontation that would change the course of his life. By the end of Part 2, James had fully processed Emily's revelations and was ready to take the next steps. He felt a strange mix of sadness, anger, and empowerment. He was sad for the deception he had unknowingly endured, angry at the manipulations he had overlooked, but empowered by the truth he now possessed. Emily's honesty had given him the tools to act wisely, to confront Lauren with clarity, and to make decisions that prioritized his well-being and future. This marked the end of Part 2, a turning point in the story where awareness replaced doubt, evidence replaced suspicion, and preparation replaced fear. James now stood on the brink of confronting the reality of his relationship, with Emily's unwavering support guiding him toward truth and resolution. The next steps would be emotional, challenging, and life-altering, setting the stage for revelations that could not be ignored. After several days of reflection, James felt a mixture of emotions he had never experienced before. Confusion, hurt, and betrayal clashed with relief and clarity. For the first time, he could see the patterns Emily had been trying to make him notice all along. The way Lauren had laughed at certain jokes, how she had exaggerated stories, and the small manipulations that once seemed harmless now painted a troubling picture. Every memory he thought was genuine now carried a hint of doubt. He kept asking himself how he could have missed it all, how someone he loved and trusted could behave in such a calculated way. Emily had been patient throughout the process, providing support without pressure. She knew James needed to come to terms with the truth at his own pace. She listened when he spoke, asked questions to help him think critically, and reminded him gently that he deserved honesty and respect in any relationship. She also encouraged him to rely on the evidence they had gathered, not just feelings or instincts. Each conversation helped him regain some of his confidence, which had been eroded by months of subtle manipulation. Finally, James knew it was time. He couldn't ignore the truth any longer, and he couldn't allow the relationship to continue without confronting the reality of Lauren's behavior. Emily offered to be there for support, but James insisted on handling the confrontation himself. He needed to hear Lauren's response directly, to see whether her charm masked deceit or whether there might be some misunderstanding. He prepared himself carefully, reviewing the incidents Emily had documented and rehearsing what he would say to maintain composure and clarity. The day came when he decided to speak with Lauren. He chose a quiet, neutral place, a park near his apartment, where there would be no interruptions and no audience. The air was crisp and the early evening sun cast long shadows over the walking paths. James waited for Lauren, heart pounding but resolute. He reminded himself that confrontation wasn't about punishment. It was about clarity, truth, and his own peace of mind. When Lauren arrived, she greeted him with a bright smile and casual conversation, unaware of the gravity of what was about to happen. James kept his tone calm and measured. "Lauren, we need to talk," he said softly but firmly. She tilted her head slightly, her smile faltering for the first time, sensing the seriousness in his voice. He continued, "There are some things I've noticed, things that don't add up, and I need you to explain them." At first, Lauren tried to laugh it off, suggesting that he might be misunderstanding or overthinking. James held his ground, presenting the incidents one by one.
"He didn't accuse."
He asked questions and sought explanations. "You told me about the donation to that charity, but the receipts don't match," he said, handing over the notes he had taken.
"Can you help me understand?"
Lauren's expression changed subtly. She tried to maintain composure, but James could see the tension building. Each question, each piece of evidence he presented, chipped away at the facade she had carefully maintained. She offered vague explanations, half-truths, and attempted diversions, but James had prepared himself for every tactic. His calm determination contrasted sharply with her growing agitation. As the conversation continued, the days after the confrontation were quiet, but the quiet was heavy. James felt a strange mix of relief and emptiness. Relief because he had finally seen the truth and could no longer be deceived. Emptiness because he had realized that someone he had loved deeply had not been who he thought. He woke up each morning with the echoes of the conversation with Lauren still fresh in his mind. The doubts, the half-truths, the manipulations, every detail replayed like a silent film that refused to fade. Emily noticed the change in him. Though he was outwardly calm, there was a weight in his demeanor, a seriousness that hadn't been there before. They spent hours talking about boundaries, trust, and the lessons he had learned. Emily reminded him gently that healing was not instantaneous, that understanding the truth did not erase the pain, and that the process of moving forward would take time. James appreciated her words but also felt the restlessness of unresolved emotions. He knew he needed to act, not just reflect. He began to reassess his life. Every aspect that had been intertwined with Lauren now seemed suspect. The conversations he had cherished, the moments he had treasured, even the places they had visited together, all carried new undertones. James realized that while he had loved genuinely, he had also allowed his judgment to be clouded. He knew that moving forward would require a careful balance of openness and caution. He could not allow the deception to define him, but he could not ignore its lessons either. James decided to take action in a measured way. He reached out to colleagues and mutual friends, gathering observations and stories that corroborated his understanding of Lauren's behavior. He didn't do this to shame or attack her. He did it to ensure he had a comprehensive view, to verify that his perspective was accurate and complete. With each story and observation, his understanding deepened, but so did his awareness of how easily manipulation could affect even the most intelligent and discerning individuals. Emily continued to support him, providing guidance and a safe space for discussion. She encouraged him to focus on himself, on his work, and on personal growth. Together, they discussed strategies for rebuilding trust, not just with others, but with himself. James realized that while he could not change what had happened, he could control how he responded, how he allowed it to influence his decisions, and how he could prevent similar situations in the future. The confrontation had also awakened a sense of empowerment in James. For the first time in months, he felt clarity in his choices and actions. He began to focus on his career with renewed dedication. Tasks that had once seemed tedious or overwhelming now carried purpose. He approached projects with meticulous attention, applying the same analytical skills that had helped him see through Lauren's manipulation to every aspect of his professional life. Colleagues noticed the change in him, his confidence, his focus, and the calm assertiveness with which he handled challenges. But the personal side of his life remained complicated. James struggled with the emotional aftermath of betrayal. He had invested deeply in someone who had not reciprocated with honesty. The experience left him cautious, hesitant to trust easily, Yet he also recognized that fear could not dictate his future. Emily encouraged him to find a balance, acknowledge the pain, learn the lesson, but also remain open to meaningful connections built on integrity and transparency. James decided to confront his feelings head-on. He began journaling, documenting the emotions, thoughts, and insights that surfaced each day. Writing became a therapeutic process, helping him make sense of the whirlwind of betrayal, disappointment, and emerging empowerment. Through journaling, he discovered patterns in his own behavior, how he had ignored small doubts, how he had allowed charm to cloud judgment, and how he could approach future relationships with greater discernment. As weeks passed, James noticed small but significant changes in his life. He was more attentive to subtleties in people's behavior, more cautious in accepting statements at face value, and more deliberate in seeking clarity before forming conclusions. The lessons learned from Lauren's deception became tools for personal growth. He no longer saw the world through a lens of naivety, but through one of informed awareness. Emily, witnessing this trend life, had begun to take on a new rhythm for James. The emotional turbulence from the past months still lingered, but it no longer controlled his thoughts. He had faced the truth, confronted deception, and worked through the pain with guidance and reflection. Now every day carried the potential for learning, growth, and meaningful experiences. There was a sense of cautious optimism, a belief that honesty and integrity could guide him to better choices. He started focusing more on his own passions, dedicating time to projects that he had previously set aside. Work became not just a duty but a channel for creativity and accomplishment. Each success, no matter how small, strengthened his sense of self-worth. James had learned to appreciate his own abilities, to trust his judgment, and to understand that he could navigate life without being dependent on the validation or deception of others. Emily continued to be a steadfast companion and advisor. She didn't impose her perspective but offered insight when needed, helping James see situations from multiple angles. Their friendship had grown deeper, not because of romance but because of shared respect, honesty, and the ability to face difficult truths together. Emily had shown him the value of trustworthy allies, and James realized that having someone to confide in, who could guide without judgment, was priceless. One day, James received an unexpected call from a mutual friend who had been aware of Lauren's patterns, but had remained silent for fear of conflict. The friend wanted to meet and share additional insights. James listened carefully, attentive to every detail. The conversation revealed further manipulations and inconsistencies, confirming what he already knew. Yet hearing it from someone else, someone impartial, brought a strange sense of closure. The pieces of the puzzle fit together completely now, leaving no room for doubt. With clarity firmly established, James made the conscious choice to release the past. He no longer felt the need to dwell on Lauren's actions or to seek validation from explanations that would never fully satisfy. He understood that the experience was not about punishment or revenge. It was about learning, growth, and preparing for a life built on truth and self-respect. This decision brought an unexpected lightness, a freedom from lingering resentment that had weighed heavily on him. James also began reflecting on his own relationships with family, friends, and colleagues. He noticed the subtle ways people could influence emotions, both positively and negatively, and recognized the importance of discernment and communication. Every interaction became an opportunity to apply the lessons he had learned, to value honesty, to recognize manipulation, and to respond with clarity and empathy. These realizations shaped his daily interactions, making him more thoughtful and deliberate in connecting with others. Emily noticed this transformation and gently reminded James that wisdom often comes from challenging experiences. She emphasized that while betrayal and disappointment are painful, they can also be catalysts for profound personal growth. James took this to heart, understanding that his resilience and renewed judgment were now part of his character, and that these qualities would serve him well in all areas of life. In the weeks that followed, James began exploring new social circles and professional opportunities. He approached new acquaintances with openness tempered by discernment, ensuring that he could build connections based on trust and authenticity. It was a delicate balance, allowing himself to be vulnerable enough to connect meaningfully, while maintaining awareness of potential deception. Over time, he became skilled at navigating this balance, learning to recognize sincerity without letting past experiences make him overly guarded. James also focused on personal development. He read extensively on emotional intelligence, human behavior, and communication. Each insight reinforced his understanding of relationships, both personal and professional. He realized that awareness, empathy, and careful observation were powerful tools in navigating the complexities of human interactions. With these skills, he felt empowered to create a life shaped by choice, rather than by the manipulations of others. One afternoon, while reviewing plans for a professional project, James received a call from someone he hadn't expected, Lauren herself. Her voice carried hesitation, and her words were carefully measured. She wanted to explain herself, perhaps seeking closure or attempting to justify past actions. James listened calmly, aware of the potential emotional impact, yet grounded in his newfound clarity. He allowed her to speak without interruption, acknowledging her words without internalizing them. After the conversation ended, James reflected quietly. There was no anger, no need for confrontation, no desire for revenge. He realized that the power had shifted entirely. The deception no longer controlled him. He had seen the truth, faced the consequences, and emerged stronger. Lauren's words, while revealing, could no longer shake his confidence or sense of self. This realization brought a profound sense of peace. In the days that followed, James found joy in small, meaningful experiences. He reconnected with friends he had neglected, pursued hobbies that had brought him comfort, and explored new opportunities in his career. He had learned to value honesty, clarity, and authenticity above all else. These principles guided every decision, conversation, and interaction, creating a foundation for a life built on integrity. Emily continued to provide support, but now as a trusted equal rather than a guide. Their friendship had matured into a relationship of mutual respect, built on shared experiences and understanding. James valued this deeply, recognizing that meaningful connections required patience, insight, and honesty, qualities he now approached with renewed commitment. One evening, James reflected on the entire journey. From the initial confusion and subtle manipulation, through the confrontation and emotional aftermath, to the clarity and empowerment he now experienced, every step had shaped him. The lessons learned were invaluable. The importance of discernment, the need for clear communication, the value of trustworthy allies, and the power of self-respect. He understood that life would always present challenges, but with these tools, he was equipped to navigate them with wisdom and confidence. James also recognized the broader implications of his journey. He realized that many people face subtle manipulation or dishonesty in various forms, relationships, workplaces, or social interactions. By facing deception with clarity and composure, and by seeking support from trustworthy allies, individuals could protect themselves, learn, and grow. This awareness became a principle he carried forward, guiding interactions and decisions in all areas of life. In time, James found opportunities to mentor others who faced similar challenges. He shared his experiences, not as a tale of betrayal, but as a story of resilience, growth, and empowerment. He emphasized the importance of observation, patience, and seeking the truth, encouraging others to navigate complex emotional landscapes with confidence and clarity. This mentorship became a source of fulfillment, allowing him to transform a painful experience into a tool for helping others. As months passed, James's life stabilized in a way he had not imagined possible. The lessons learned from deception had become guiding principles, shaping relationships, career decisions, and personal growth. He approached life with awareness, empathy, and discernment, knowing that integrity and honesty were the foundation of meaningful connections. The clarity and empowerment he had gained allowed him to navigate challenges with calm confidence, transforming past pain into strength. Emily remained a constant presence, a reminder of the value of support, honesty, and courage in facing difficult truths. Their bond, strengthened through shared experiences, became a source of stability, encouragement, and insight. James appreciated the depth of her friendship, understanding that genuine connections required trust, patience, and integrity, qualities he now cultivated in every aspect of life. Eventually, James found a sense of closure. He no longer dwelled on the deception or the betrayal, nor did he seek validation or explanations from Lauren. He had confronted the truth. Processed the emotions, and emerged with clarity and empowerment. The journey had been painful, but it had also been transformative, teaching him lessons that would guide him for the rest of his life. In the final chapter of this experience, James looked forward with hope and determination. He knew that challenges would continue to arise, that people might disappoint, and that life would never be without complications. Yet he also knew that he now possessed the insight, resilience, and clarity to face these challenges with confidence. The pain of the past had been transformed into wisdom, and the experience had prepared him to build a life grounded in truth, integrity, and meaningful connections. As the story concludes, James stands as a testament to the power of clarity, resilience, and personal growth. He faced betrayal and deception, navigated emotional turbulence, and emerged stronger, wiser, and more self-aware. Through support, reflection, and courage, he transformed a painful experience into a foundation for a fulfilling, empowered life. The lessons learned extend beyond his personal journey, offering guidance and inspiration for anyone who has faced deception, betrayal, or uncertainty. Part 5 emphasizes resolution, empowerment, and the enduring value of truth and integrity. James's journey concludes not with revenge or bitterness, but with understanding, growth, and hope, leaving a story of human resilience and insight that resonates deeply and inspires thoughtful reflection. Formation felt a deep sense of pride and relief. She had feared that James might struggle or remain trapped in disbelief, but he was navigating the process with resilience and intelligence. She reminded him that recovery from deception was not linear, and that moments of doubt or sadness were natural. Together, they explored ways to strengthen his emotional resilience, including mindfulness, reflection, and leaning on trustworthy friends for support. The office environment, which had once been neutral, now carried a different energy. James interacted with colleagues with renewed confidence, and his professional demeanor reflected his internal clarity. People noticed his calm assertiveness and the thoughtful way he approached challenges. Some colleagues sought his advice, recognizing the depth of insight he had gained from navigating complex emotional situations. James realized that the personal growth he had experienced was spilling over into all aspects of life, strengthening his relationships, career, and self-awareness. During this time, Emily shared some stories from her own experiences, subtly helping James see that deception and betrayal were not uncommon, but that how one responded defined character and future opportunities. She emphasized that integrity, courage, and clarity were the foundation of meaningful connections. James absorbed these lessons, recognizing that while the past could not be changed, his response to it could shape his future profoundly. Despite the progress, James occasionally felt pangs of anger and sadness. He remembered the moments of charm and intimacy with Lauren, and how easily he had been misled. These memories could have overwhelmed him, but he learned to view them analytically rather than emotionally, understanding the mechanisms of manipulation without letting them dominate his life. Emily encouraged him to channel these emotions constructively, using them as motivation for personal growth and protection in future interactions. As weeks turned into months, James gradually reestablished a sense of normalcy. His routine, once disrupted by emotional turmoil, regained structure. He engaged in hobbies, deepened friendships, and pursued professional goals with newfound clarity. The experience with Lauren, while painful, had strengthened his resilience, sharpened his perception, and reinforced the importance of integrity and honesty in all relationships. Emily continued to be a steady presence, helping James navigate tricky social dynamics and offering reassurance when doubts resurfaced. Their conversations were candid, filled with reflection, insight, and mutual respect. Emily never imposed her views but guided James toward understanding and empowerment. He realized that her support had been instrumental in helping him regain control over his life, navigate complex emotions, and emerge stronger from the ordeal. One afternoon, James reflected on the journey he had undertaken since Emily's intervention. He remembered the confusion, the slow realization of deception, the confrontation with Lauren, and the emotional aftermath. Each stage had been challenging, but each had contributed to his growth. He understood that while betrayal could not be undone, the lessons he had learned were invaluable. The final piece of the puzzle for James was forgiveness, not for Lauren, not for the deception, but for himself. He forgave himself for the moments of naivety, for the trust he had given too freely, and for the times he had ignored small doubts. This forgiveness did not diminish the lessons learned. Rather, It allowed him to release the burden of guilt and move forward with clarity and purpose. As Part 4 concludes, James stands at a crossroads. He has navigated the emotional turbulence of betrayal, confronted manipulation directly, and emerged with clarity, resilience, and wisdom. Emily's guidance has been invaluable, providing support, perspective, and unwavering honesty. James now faces the future with a renewed sense of self, prepared to cultivate relationships based on integrity, pursue personal and professional goals with confidence, and navigate life with insight sharpened by experience. The story at this point emphasizes the aftermath of revelation, the emotional processing, personal growth, and empowerment that follow truth and confrontation. James has moved from confusion and betrayal to awareness, clarity, and resilience, setting the stage for meaningful decisions, future relationships, and life choices that reflect his newfound understanding. Part 4 ends with him stronger, wiser, and ready to face the challenges and opportunities that await. Knowing that truth, courage, and integrity will guide his path, the truth became undeniable. Lauren's charm and practiced smiles couldn't hide the inconsistencies any longer. James saw her reaction, the slight flicker of panic, the hesitation in her voice, and realized that her affection had often been self-serving. Every gift, every story, every gesture he had once trusted was now part of a pattern designed to influence, manipulate, or benefit herself. The realization was painful but also clarifying. James stayed composed, asking clear, pointed questions and giving Lauren the opportunity to explain. Each answer revealed more contradictions, more half-truths. She tried to rationalize, to justify, to twist events into something more favorable for herself, but James no longer allowed doubt to cloud his judgment. He listened carefully, his mind focused on facts, not emotions. The clarity he had gained from Emily's support and documentation strengthened his resolve. The confrontation was long and emotionally draining. James experienced waves of hurt, anger, and disbelief. Memories he had cherished suddenly seemed tainted. Moments of laughter and connection now carried an undertone of manipulation. Yet through it all, he remained composed, determined to see the truth clearly and respond with wisdom rather than impulsive emotion. Finally, Lauren's defenses began to crumble completely. She realized that James had seen through the patterns she had carefully hidden. Her smile faltered and her usual confidence wavered. For the first time, she was confronted with someone who could see through her charm and deception. James's calm, factual approach left little room for her to manipulate or evade. When the confrontation ended, James felt a complex mix of emotions. He was hurt and disappointed, mourning the trust he had given so freely. But he was also relieved. Relieved to have clarity, relieved to know the truth, and relieved that he could move forward without deception clouding his judgment. He thanked Lauren for the honesty she had provided, even though it was partial and reluctant. He recognized that the truth, no matter how painful, was always preferable to living in ignorance. Afterward, James reached out to Emily, sharing how the conversation had gone. He expressed gratitude for her courage and support. Without her intervention, he acknowledged, he might have continued down a path that could have caused far more pain. Emily reassured him that he had handled the situation with integrity and composure, reinforcing the importance of his clear thinking and calm demeanor during the confrontation. The days following the confrontation were filled with reflection and self-discovery for James. He revisited memories, conversations, and experiences with Lauren, analyzing them with a new perspective. He noticed patterns he had previously ignored, small manipulations and subtle influences that now made sense. Each realization was bittersweet, painful because of the deception, yet empowering because of the clarity it brought. Emily remained a steady presence, offering guidance and emotional support without judgment. She helped James process the complex emotions of betrayal, disappointment, and relief. They discussed boundaries, trust, and the importance of discernment in relationships. James realized that the experience, while painful, had taught him invaluable lessons about honesty, integrity, and the need to trust his instincts. As James began to rebuild his sense of self and confidence, he also considered the broader impact of the experience. He recognized the importance of surrounding himself with people who valued honesty and transparency. He reflected on his own tendencies to trust too easily and vowed to combine openness with discernment in future relationships. Emily's support had provided him with perspective, helping him to see the situation clearly without being clouded by emotion. Lauren's absence from his life brought an unexpected sense of peace. The confrontation had ended the deception, allowing James to move forward without uncertainty. He no longer felt the subtle pressure and manipulation that had existed, freeing him to focus on personal growth, professional goals, and meaningful relationships built on honesty. Through the experience, James also learned to value courage in others. Emily had risked discomfort and potential criticism to ensure he had the truth. Her integrity and willingness to act on what she knew reinforced the importance of honesty and trustworthiness in all relationships. He understood that true friendship and support were about more than casual interactions. They required courage, awareness, and care. By the end of Part 3, James had faced the deception directly, experienced the pain of betrayal, and emerged with clarity and empowerment. He had seen the truth behind Lauren's charm and manipulation, understood the patterns of her behavior, and taken control of his own decisions and future. With Emily's continued support, he was ready to move forward, strengthened by the lessons learned and prepared for the challenges and opportunities that lay ahead. The story at this point illustrates the turning point, the confrontation that separates illusion from reality, manipulation from honesty, and uncertainty from empowerment. James's journey reflects the complexity of human relationships, the importance of discernment, and the value of having supportive, trustworthy allies. Part 3 ends with him standing firm in truth, ready to face the next chapter of his life with confidence, wisdom, and a renewed sense of self. At the same time, James was beginning to notice subtle things as well, though he didn't yet connect the dots. He noticed small inconsistencies in Lauren's stories. A dinner she said she had volunteered for suddenly became a casual gathering. A gift she claimed to have bought for charity seemed to appear mysteriously at home without receipts or confirmation. James trusted her, though, and wanted to give her the benefit of the doubt. He reminded himself that everyone makes mistakes, that sometimes people forget, that he shouldn't be suspicious without real proof. Emily, however, couldn't ignore it. Her mind replayed incidents over and over. She remembered when Lauren had asked her to cover for her during a meeting, claiming it was urgent, only for Emily to discover later that Lauren had simply skipped work for a personal appointment. She remembered small comments about gifts, money, and favors, each one adding a layer to the picture that Emily had tried to ignore. It wasn't easy for her to gather her thoughts. She didn't want to be wrong, didn't want to interfere in someone else's relationship without cause, but her conscience kept reminding her that if she stayed silent, James might end up hurt. The days went by, and Emily began paying even closer attention. She started documenting things quietly, taking notes about incidents that didn't match reality. Sometimes it was small, like Lauren claiming to have sent flowers to a sick coworker when she hadn't. Other times it was more significant, like Lauren asking James for money to help a friend, and then Emily discovering that there was no friend and the money had been spent elsewhere. Emily's unease grew heavier. She knew she had a responsibility, but she also feared the consequences. James, on the other hand, continued enjoying his time with Lauren, unaware of Emily's concerns. He saw the sweet side, the charming stories, the moments when Lauren seemed genuinely caring. He trusted his feelings more than the small doubts Emily had seen. He wanted to believe in the relationship, but Emily couldn't. She had seen patterns, had observed inconsistencies, and felt certain that something was off. She began to plan how she could approach the situation without seeming confrontational or jealous. One evening, Emily stayed late again, hoping to finish her work before heading home. Lauren arrived unexpectedly and asked Emily for help, mentioning a financial problem she was having with James. She spoke casually, smiling and laughing, but Emily noticed the tension in her voice and the way she avoided direct answers. Something in Emily's gut told her that Lauren's charm was only a mask. Emily quietly recorded notes about the conversation, not to embarrass anyone but to have clarity if the time came to speak to James. By this point, Emily realized that what she knew couldn't remain hidden. The evidence was small but consistent, forming a pattern too strong to ignore. She remembered her own values, her belief in honesty, and how she would want someone to act if the roles were reversed. She spent the night thinking through every scenario. She imagined James continuing in the relationship without knowing the truth, and felt a heavy sense of responsibility. The next morning, Emily made a decision. She would approach James, but carefully. She would lay out facts, not opinions. She would give him the space to process, to believe or question, and she would let him decide what to do. It wasn't an easy choice. She knew it could upset James, change her relationship with him, and even make Lauren angry. But the thought of letting James continue in a potentially harmful relationship made it impossible to stay silent. Part 1 ends with Emily walking into work, determined but nervous. She glanced around at the familiar office, at the people who would never know the inner story she carried, and at Lauren, who was unaware of the quiet storm building around her. Emily's heart beat faster. She knew the conversation with James would be difficult, emotional, and life-changing, but she also knew that sometimes truth had to be faced, no matter how uncomfortable it might be. This was only the beginning, and the decisions made in the coming days would shape lives in ways no one could predict. This completes Part 1, 3,000 words when fully expanded for YouTube narration pacing, in a natural, human-centric style.